As the night descended on the magnificent mansion, where the sparkling crystal chandeliers illuminated the smiling faces of the upper class, none of them knew that the peaceful moment was just the fragile surface of a chaotic abyss waiting to swallow them all. Everything was arranged so perfectly that it was almost unreal: the melodious music, the flowing wine, the laughter that rang out as if the people here had never known fear. But in the midst of that lavish scene, a secret that had been smoldering for too long was about to explode. Just one letter, one bomb, and one unplanned step would cause all the masks to fall, revealing the true faces twisted by years of hatred, betrayal, and pent-up anger. The party that was meant to celebrate the splendor of a family would become the birth ceremony of its own downfall. Isaiah entered the brightly lit hall like a crack tearing through the flawless painting that the Dupree family had so carefully constructed. Everything in that room, from the sparkling crystal glasses, the snow-white embroidered tablecloths, to the soft, elegant music drifting like a night breeze, carried the carefully arranged order of a grand performance designed to bury the rot beneath. But when he crossed the great doors with the secret letter clutched tightly in his hand, that order began to fracture before anyone could notice. The letter was not just a stack of paper. It was a blade, sharp and merciless, hanging over the throat of the entire Dupree dynasty. It carried a truth Anita had buried for more than 3 decades, a truth that, if unleashed, would sweep away everything they had built: reputation, power, fortune, political connections. All of it could collapse in a single night. Isaiah knew this. That was why each of his steps across the marble floor echoed like a death knell, deliberate, cold, and unrelenting. Anita stood near the wide window, surrounded by a sea of light spilling from the massive chandeliers above. Her black gown, high-necked and adorned with pearls, looked more like armor than fabric. The moment her eyes found Isaiah, her face froze, but something in her gaze twisted inward, as if an invisible hand had seized her throat. The sensation of betrayal threaded through her like ice, not only because of his presence, but because she understood what it meant. The past she had buried was clawing its way back, alive and thirsty for blood. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She had believed everything was in place. This party had been planned not as a celebration but as a display of dominance. The powerful, the politicians, the investors were all here, raising their glasses to sweet promises. They all believed the Duprees were a unified, golden empire. But they didn't know what lay beneath the silk and marble, a graveyard of betrayal, guilt, and sins long paid for with other people's lives. Anita swallowed hard, her throat raw. Her gaze locked onto the letter in Isaiah's hand as if it were the executioner's blade. This wasn't fear. It was a rage so heavy it burned. The rage of a beast cornered, ready to tear and bleed to protect the illusion that was the last thing it had left. Across the hall, Vernon moved like a predator. He didn't know the exact content of the letter, but he knew Anita's expression. He had seen it only once before, the night a man who betrayed them was erased from existence. But now, that look was aimed at Isaiah, a man who had once been one of their own. As Vernon scanned the room, something caught his eye beneath the stage, where Anita was supposed to give her speech later that night. A dark, heavy object, carefully hidden beneath the gold-plated decorations. Not a prop. Not sound equipment. A bomb. Time froze in his head. He didn't scream or lunge like a cheap hero in a movie. He knew one wrong sound could shatter everything. The crowd was laughing, wine shimmering in their glasses. They didn't know that just a few feet beneath their feet was enough to turn the entire ballroom into fire and rubble. Panic didn't paralyze him, it condensed him. This was no accident. Someone wanted to burn the Duprees to the ground tonight. Worse, if the letter was revealed amid the chaos, their dynasty would not just fall. It would be erased. Isaiah kept walking toward Anita with the stillness of a man whose fury had calcified into purpose. Inside him, there was no tremor. Just an anger honed into steel. He had once been their shield, had once believed that standing beside the Duprees was a privilege. But the closer he came, the more he realized it was a cage. The truths contained in that letter were the same ones that destroyed his mother, pushed his life into darkness, and robbed him of any notion of justice. Tonight, he would end it. Anita felt the storm before it hit. What suffocated her was not the content of the letter, she had lived with that truth for years, but the fact that the man holding it was Isaiah, the one she once believed would never betray her. She had been wrong. The dead don't stay buried. Their eyes locked across the glittering room. No one around them, not the laughing guests, not the clinking glasses, noticed that two souls at the heart of the celebration were silently falling into the abyss. One carried the truth and hatred. The other carried the death of an empire. There was no speech, no gesture, just a wordless understanding that cut through the air like a blade. In Vernon's head, 100 scenarios collided. He could slip away, call in his people to disarm the bomb, and deal with Isaiah after. Or he could act now, silence the traitor before the letter saw the light of day. But all those options bled. There was no path that wasn't paved in violence. And worse than fear was the feeling creeping into him, loss of control. The Duprees had never been cornered. Tonight, they were. Anita began to feel her lungs tighten. She wasn't afraid of dying, she had never feared death, but she was choking on how fast everything was slipping away. She had believed power could buy her time, that it could bury the past. But time had expired. Every erased trace, every hidden deal, every coerced silence was crawling back like shadows with teeth. Vernon's hand slid into his jacket pocket where a compact pistol rested. But even he knew one wrong move would ignite everything. The helplessness itched under his skin, unfamiliar and infuriating. No one in the room realized how close they were to annihilation. Isaiah lifted the letter higher, the lights reflecting off the paper like a divine verdict. Mercy didn't exist in him anymore. His rage had become something living, pushing him forward. He didn't just want to expose them. He wanted them to hurt. He wanted their fall to be loud, violent, and final. The letter was the spark, and the bomb beneath the stage was the fuel. Everything was already in place for the offering. Anita clenched her fists until her nails left crescent moons on her palms. The crowd faded from her perception. Only Isaiah and that letter remained. She knew there was no way back. She would either destroy him or be destroyed. The laughter continued. Music flowed through the air like perfume masking rot. No one knew they were dancing on the edge of a cliff. No one knew there was a bomb beneath their feet or that a family's darkest secrets were seconds away from detonation. They only believed this was the Duprees' grandest night. That belief would make it their bloodiest. Vernon's eyes met Anita's. There was a chilling clarity in them. She would never let herself be humiliated in public. If she couldn't stay on top, she would drag everything down with her. Isaiah saw it too. The cold resolve. This was not a woman who would crumble. This was a woman ready to burn the world down if it meant winning. Silence wrapped around the three of them while the room outside remained alive with sound and movement. Three minds spun in a private storm, one determined to expose, one desperate to survive, and one hellbent on preserving a crumbling empire. None of them realized that their silence was the overture to a bloodstorm. Isaiah's grip on the letter tightened like a vow. Vernon's teeth clenched under the weight of powerlessness. Anita raised her chin, her gaze sharp and unyielding. They all understood, after tonight, there would be no way back. As the smoke began to rise from the stage, the chaotic sound of clinking glasses and suppressed laughter mixed with the smell of burning, the three people at the center of that internal storm stood still in the unformed ashes. Isaiah, the letter still clutched in his hand, felt his heart pounding, both from the anger that had been released and from the cold that had swallowed the last remnants of his kindness. Everything he had believed in, family, power, the fairness of life, was now reduced to a final drowned in the smell of smoke and potential destruction. Anita looked around, her eyes shining with determination, but deep inside was an unconcealable fear. She knew that there was no going back, every choice now tinged with red. Years of pent-up decisions, secrets she once believed safe, now burst forth in the most brutal way, forcing her to fight not just for her life but for her own power, honor, and identity. Vernon, standing in the corner of the room, felt powerlessness and anger coursing through every fiber of his being. He looked at the now disabled bomb, at the letter in Isaiah's hand, and saw that power was no longer something he could control. All his strategies, all his elaborate plans, were like sand slipping through his fingers. In this moment, all that remained was anger and despair. A rage born of fear of betrayal, of the feeling of power slipping away, of the realization that everything they had tried to hide had exploded beyond repair. Outside, the crowd was still in chaos, many of whom had realized the impending disaster but did not fully understand the cause. The screams, the running, the panicked looks reflecting the flashing lights from the emergency lights created a scene that was both chaotic and naked. In the chaos, three people stood still, cornered by their own choices and internal conflicts. This was the moment when power, betrayal, hatred, and long-suppressed secrets exploded all at once, making everything impossible to return. And when the night fell again, only ashes, released anger, and cold silence remained in the once bustling room. A seemingly impregnable empire now collapsed piece by piece, leaving behind a valuable lesson: no one can escape the past, and the truth, no matter how deep it is buried, always finds a way to return in the most cruel ways.